In today's installment of Unpacked,
a lot of people who do abort want to have children.
We still can't talk about sexuality
because people are going to judge you for having an abortion.
I think my worst fear was the fact that I could have died.
Today's discussion will cause some serious arguments in many of your homes because we all have very strong feelings about it. And it's about abortion. Our two guests today share their personal stories. Johannesburg-based senior reporter, feminist, and mother of two, Gaopalelwe Phalatsile, was born in Monakado in the Northwest. She then moved to Mpumalanga in Standerton, where she completed her matric and went on to study at Wits. Lebogang Brenda Motsumi is an HIV-positive social activist and entrepreneur who grew up in the back rooms of Linden with her domestic worker mother. She then moved in with her grandparents in the rural areas of Mpumalanga when her parents got divorced. In part one of this conversation on abortion, Lebogang shares her story. Let's unpack. Gaopalelwe, thank you so much for joining us in studio today. We appreciate you being able to talk to us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Lebogang, who is on VideoCon, is also speaking to us. Lebo, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, ladies, firstly, respect to you for speaking so openly. Just by showing up, I know you being open to have the conversation. Why do you think the conversation of abortion is so upsetting to so many people?
For me, I think it's because there's so much secrecy around the topic and also because there's so much stigma. So instead of treating abortion as a medical issue, we're treating it as a, how can I put it, a moral issue. Yeah. Yes, you helped me, yes. A moral issue. So for me, I've come to a point where I've journeyed from it being a moral issue to it being a decision I can make for myself and go do a medical procedure.
And from your side, Lebogang?
I agree with what she's saying. It's really the secrecy around it, and also we still can't talk about sexuality in an African context, you know, and the fact that we're not comfortable with our sexuality or we don't even know our sexual health rights, then it makes it an issue to be able to talk around it. Also, there isn't much talk about termination of pregnancy, you know, like she said, it's things we do behind the corner and then we come back and everything is perfect.
I think also sometimes the fact that, you know, you touch on sexuality, but the fact that we don't discuss the varying circumstances that could lead a person to make that decision. But even then, I'm still of the view, it shouldn't matter how you got there. The fact that you are able to make that choice for yourself is what matters.
Yeah, for me, it's actually a big thing. When I'm in an organization about it, and when women come to me and say they've done it, I say, I'm proud of you, because that's probably the biggest decision you've made in your life, or maybe not, but mostly it is. Yeah.
And I would always go on to say, what woman would want to have to make that decision?
Exactly, because it's not easy, especially because it's become a secret. Now, even in terms of the clinics and going, there are a lot of things that are happening there that shouldn't be happening. But because it's such a secret thing and we can't stand up and say, my rights need to be met, you know, no woman will go to a clinic and come back and be treated unfairly and then say, yeah, I'm going to complain. Who's going to do that? Because people are going to judge you for having an abortion.
Yes. So from your own personal journey, when was the first time you ever heard of the term abortion or termination, and what was your understanding?
My first time was when I started my periods. I was probably 12 or 13, and it was back home, and it was in a gossip setting. So I was a child sitting there, and I heard adults talking about a neighbor's daughter who had had an abortion, and they were speaking about it in a very negative light.
Yes.
From what I heard from that, to me, it was she killed a baby. Wow. And that's what I got from it. And that was the very first time I heard about it.
Lebo, when was your first time ever hearing about abortion?
First time hearing about abortion was when I was actually pregnant, and my friends were kind of advising me on what I should do, drink Coke and drink that, you know, all these funny myths, right? Of course, I had known that there's something called abortion, but I didn't actually care. Like I didn't care what it was because it kind of had nothing to do with me until my friend started advising me to say, you can do this, you can go there to get rid, inverted commas, of the problem.
What do you think of that phrase, though? You know, for even representation in films and movies and probably in women's real lives, where a man is saying to her, I'm going to help you get rid of the problem. Rid of the problem. What do you think of that term?
Yeah, it's actually the first time I've had to think about it because I've never heard it in that context. But I think for me, thinking about it now, it again goes back to that negative connotation of what abortion is, because it almost feels like, you know, you're just getting rid of a problem, but then we don't realize that a lot of people who do abort want to have children. People think that only people who don't want children want to abort, but in actual fact, different circumstances lead us to having abortions. Sometimes you can't afford to actually have the child at the time. You're in an abusive relationship, you're thinking, why would I bring a child to this mess? Then you have to abort. Or it's a medical condition. It might not be good for you to carry on with the pregnancy and you have to abort. So it's not just getting rid of a problem, it's actually a decision depending on the circumstances.
Lebo, so take us back to that time when you found out that you were pregnant and you got to understand what the term abortion means, and also how you found yourself in that place in your life.
So I got pregnant at 16, and I actually found out I was pregnant, I think, after 4 months, because not getting my periods, I didn't really understand what was happening, you know, but I started gaining weight and funny things started happening. And I went to 2 close friends of mine and I was like, guys, this is the situation. What do I do? I can't tell my mom. She's probably going to kill me. They can't see me at school. They're all going to kick me out because it's a private school. They won't even give me a chance to explain myself. And then they started telling me myths, you know, take Coke, take this, push your tummy, whatever the case is. And then I was going through a newspaper one day and I saw advertisement. You can get this here, get an abortion there, pay this much. And I found myself in Alexander. So this was a doctor's surgery. But the woman working there would then perform procedures on a Friday when he was gone for his prayers.
Can I ask before we get into you actually going through, you know, getting to that point where you're responding to an advert? You said just now that the school didn't give you, you know, you wouldn't get a chance to explain yourself. What would explaining yourself have sounded or looked like?
The fact that I'm pregnant and I'm 16, you know, and I'm school going. Not every school understands, inverted commas, the situation of being pregnant and the fact that you still can get education regardless of what's happening. So I went to a school that had made it clear that should this happen, we are going to expel you. No explanations whatsoever. I could have been sexually abused, but for them is the fact that I am pregnant.
I understand.
And that already disqualifies me to be a student at this school.
Yes. And the reason I am asking is not because I think one reason is more important than another for one to terminate. I'm using it to demonstrate that there are multiple scenarios. We have laws in our country, of course, that govern minors having sex and when it is assault and when it is not. So I think it's important to also keep that in mind while we're having that discussion. So now you reach a point where you find yourself in Alexander. What happened then?
So I found myself in Alexander, and I must say, I had told my family about it, and I told them this is what I want to do, and I saw this. And my mom supported me, even though she didn't understand and like the idea, but she just thought, let me support you and be there for you.
How did your family react? How did your family actually take to you telling them that you are pregnant?
My mom cried. My sister also cried. It was a shock. And I thought they were going to judge me and swear at me and whatever the case is, but they actually cried. Funny, I didn't expect such a reaction. They cried and said they will support whatever decision that I personally make.
Okay, so now mom goes with you even though she didn't really understand or necessarily agree. And then what happened?
Yes. So we got to Alexander. I remember it was a Friday afternoon. and you go into this place and you pay the amount that they ask for. I forgot if it was 1,000 rand or 700. And then they put you into different rooms because there's 10 different girls. So there's like different rooms, and they'll start like from the first girl, and you can hear her screaming, and of course you kind of get anxious and scared. Eventually they get to you and they tell you to open your thighs, and it's not a very nice service because they're trying to look at time and they're making their money. They don't care about you. So they inserted some kind of object in my uterus and said that I'll start getting pains. I can just then remove it and go to the hospital and say I'm having a miscarriage. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. I found myself.
Oh, please give us a moment to just process. I know you're taking us quite quickly through your story, right? So, I mean, by this point, you knew that you were about 4 months pregnant, or did you estimate, or a doctor told you?
No, so I estimated, but by the time we were doing this procedure, I was 6 months, 7 months pregnant.
Okay. And
that's how long it took for my family to find out.
I understand. And then at this point, it was an illegal service. You saw the advertisement somewhere in a paper.
Yes, it was an illegal abortion, even though I personally didn't know it was illegal. Because it was just an advertisement about abortion and whatever else they were advertising.
So you didn't know at the time that you can actually just go to a doctor for a legal abortion?
So my friends did mention it, but they said they're not going to help me because it's too late. And of course, I didn't want to go to the clinic because of the stigma and then what happens in clinic. It's something that we have experienced, and there's also hearsays from friends. So for me, the clinic was a no-go area.
I got you. So now they place an object inside and they say, you're going to feel pains. Did they explain in detail to you what's going to happen to your body, what to expect, or it was just a quick in and out thing?
So the lady said, I'm going to experience pains which feel like period pains, and I'm going to probably start bleeding or some liquid will come out of my. So she said at that point, I can remove the object and then I'll start bleeding even more, and I can go then to the hospital and say I'm having a miscarriage.
Wow. And did you have, obviously you were quite young at the time. What were some of the questions you had in mind that you didn't get an opportunity to ask?
I thought I was going to die. I was blaming myself, and I genuinely felt I was killing a baby. And I think yes, I was 16, but I was still trying to figure out how did I even fall pregnant. Yes, I had sexual intercourse, but it was kind of blurry. I didn't know that. That sex is going to lead to pregnancy, but when it kind of happened to you, you're thinking, what exactly happened?
So did you then eventually, you went home after this, and then what happened?
So I went home, and my mom was there. My aunt also came, and the pain started Friday evening, but there was nothing coming out. So I was in so much pain. I had to sleep on the floor and have some pillows that I could kind of lean on. Saturday, the whole day I had pains, and my mom did say that I was becoming a bit pale. At this point, there was liquid coming out, but there wasn't a lot of blood. So on the Sunday morning, she decided, no, she's going to go back and look for these ladies and ask what she should do. And I think by God's grace, on her way to the clinic, to the nurses rather, she met someone on the way. She was a nurse, and she's just like, please don't judge me, but this is the situation that's happening at home, and I don't know what to do. And the nurse said, you need to go take your daughter immediately and take her to hospital because she could lose her life.
Whew. Is there anything from her story that you are surprised to hear about her experience?
No, maybe I would have been a few years ago, but with what I know now in terms of the organization I'm part of, this is not something new. I was particularly shocked by, it's always a shocker by her having to go home and go through that,
No, because that's exactly what I was thinking, is that the procedure is done and then you go home, you left to yourself. There's no one monitoring how you respond. And the hope is just go to the hospital, tell them you've had a miscarriage. So obviously, I'm assuming from a medical perspective that what took place was completely incorrect.
Yeah, it was completely illegal and it could have been fatal.
Yes. So Lebo, what happened when you got to the hospital?
Got to the hospital. I was actually rushed into casualty, and the doctors were actually very nice. Nobody judged me. Nobody called me names. They literally told me they get a lot of these cases, but of course they told me, should it happen, I should be more careful, and whatever the case is, right? And they removed the object and did tell me that if I carry on with the pregnancy, which I decided to, there are chances that I'll give birth to a premature baby because my uterus was now a bit open and they couldn't really close it up.
And do you know now what that object was?
It was some plastic kind of object. To this date, I don't know what it was, but it was plastic and they kind of hooked it so that my uterus could open. I really don't know what the object is to date.
Wow. Okay. And I think that's quite a heavy one. That's definitely a heavy one. So, Lebo, what ended up happening after this? Because you say the doctors asked you, should you continue? I'm assuming they told you, listen, the baby's still there.
Yes, they told me the baby's still safe and advised that I continue carrying the baby. And should I not want to raise the baby, I can always put it up for adoption. And that is the information they gave me. But my family and I and my sisters, everybody, we agreed that I'm going to keep the pregnancy. And when the baby's born, they will give me the support that I need. And of course, go back to school and so forth, you know? So I kept the pregnancy.
And at this time, what was it that was going through your mind? Did you feel like it's the universe speaking to you or it was meant to be?
I think my worst fear was the fact that I could have died. And my other fear, honestly speaking, was not being able to go back to school, you know? Those were the things that I was really thinking about. At 16, I didn't see it as God's grace or something that was meant to happen type of thing, because eventually, inverted commas, I wanted to get rid of the problem. That's what was going through my mind. But I had to find myself in a space where I accept the fact that I'm pregnant and I'm going to give birth to a baby.
So then what was the recovery like from that particular situation before come time that you have to give birth?
So I was given Panado because we know when you have a baby, you can't take a lot of prescribed medication. So I was given that, but I really did get better. And what I did was I continued going to school, but I'd always wear a blazer. And I would kind of, because I'm a big girl, it didn't really show. I would kind of hide my tummy and stuff like that, you know, until I got into labor, which was a Saturday, and I gave birth.
Talk me through what that experience was like for you, because many women, you know, have a quite a period of time in normal pregnancies to get used to the idea that I've got a child on the way. Whereas in your case, you had decided you don't want this, and then suddenly it's there. Now you want it. Were you still afraid at this point? Were you still wishing it was different, or had you already settled in your mind this is your reality?
I had accepted that this is my reality, and a couple of my family members, I won't say who exactly, kind of shared their experiences of teen pregnancy, and it kind of made me feel better because at the time, I thought I have shamed my family. I thought I have put them through so much because they kind of expected better from me. I felt I had let them go and so forth. So at that moment in time, I'd accepted that I'm pregnant, even though I was still confused about motherhood and what's going to happen after giving birth.
And it goes back to the secrecy that you spoke about earlier, that actually you might have had certain support from the beginning if it was a more open discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you give birth. What happens next?
So on a Saturday, it was the 13th of May, I got into, I woke up and I had pains. I didn't know if that they were labor pains. So my mom again called my aunt, because my mom is really, she's a strong woman, but she was a bit like, she needed a bit of support. So she called my aunt and she's like, okay, I think she's in labor, but she was afraid to even check or see what's happening. And then my aunt was like, okay, let me check. And she confirmed that I'm in labor, but she thought, let's just wait a little bit and then we'll take her to the hospital. And then in the evening, eventually, they got transport and took me to the hospital. I got there, I was rushed to the ward, and I literally gave birth, I think, after 5 minutes.
Wow.
And it was a premature birth because I was now 8 months pregnant.
And how was that experience for you?
It was horrible. Oh my God. It was, nobody should go through that. It was horrible, but I still was confused. As much as there was pain, I also felt a relief to say, okay, this has happened. Honestly speaking, all I was thinking about is going on with my life. You know? And at that moment in time, I felt a huge relief, but also, when they put the baby on your chest, I felt some kind of connection that I really can't explain today.
So was baby okay when baby was born?
So they put him on my chest for like a second, then they had to rush into ICU because he was not okay. So he stayed ICU for like a month because he couldn't breathe on his own because his lungs were not matured. And
then what happened after that?
So a month later, we were then told that they're discharging him. He was still very tiny, but they said that he could now breathe without the machines, and there was no reason to keep him anymore. So we went and we took him. Unfortunately, I had to stay with the baby at home because my mom is a domestic worker, so she was staying at the residence where she was working, but she would always come back after work just to check on us. And I think it was around, I can't remember the dates, but I think it was again the 13th of July, if I'm not incorrect. I woke up in the morning, I would wake up and I would feed the baby, but I'd also sleep, but I'd always kind of stay awake. And I don't know if I overslept or what happened on that day, but when I woke up in the morning, he was literally blue, and I was trying to figure out what's happening. He was cold, and I ran to, there's a nurse here at the building that I knew. So I ran to her and I was like, I don't know what's happening, And I remember the nurse's words. She literally said, I'm not going to help a person like you. You brought yourself into the situation. She had all right to do that. It's okay, Then I went to go call another lady who then came, and she then confirmed that the baby is dead. But also she called my sister, and then we went to the hospital, and that's when they confirmed that, unfortunately, my son was deceased.
I'm very, very sorry to hear that. And I'm so sorry for what happened to you immediately after while you were looking for help. I'm very, very sorry.
Thank you. I'm good.
Lebo, were the doctors able to tell you what the cause of death was?
I really can't remember what happened because my sister and my brother-in-law are the ones that went into the room, and I can't remember the conversation that was had, and I didn't even ask. I was blaming myself to say if I had not done this, and I was also trying to think, did I oversleep? Is that why you passed away? So there were a lot of emotions, so I really, at the time, wasn't thinking to ask what had happened.
So, Lebu, the nurse that you went to get help from, how did that nurse even know that you had gone for an abortion?
So I don't know how to explain this, but in Tswana, I was a forward child. I think that's how you explain it in English, even though it sounds a bit weird, but I was a forward child, and everybody saw what I was doing. I was dating at a young age, and I felt she didn't want to associate herself with a girl who is forward.
And what year was this?
I was 16. Oh my God, I'm 32 now. Was it 2006 or 5?
16 years ago. 16 years ago.
Yeah, because I'm 32 now. Yeah.
And the sad reality is you still have nurses with certain beliefs that will have certain attitudes. Have you found that to be the case in your work?
Yeah, it is the case a lot of the times. In the abortion law, there's a clause called the Conscientious objection that basically means nurses and doctors can refuse to offer an abortion based on their personal beliefs. And some of them use that to turn away people who are in need of abortions or to judge them.
But also, it doesn't give permission to judge. It just says you can opt not to perform the procedure yourself.
Yes, it does. And it also says you need to actually refer to someone who can. That's the law. But because the law is not being practiced or implemented properly, then that's what happens.
But in the case of yourself, Lebo, you weren't asking her to perform a termination. You were asking her to help save your child.
Yeah, I was asking her to help save my child. But again, I feel she had all right to deny me help, you know. And I actually wasn't angry at her afterwards. Actually, years later, she became my grand, you know, because she was quite old. And I didn't build any resentment against her because she had all right again to deny me. Even though at first I was like, oh, that was harsh, but I then started to understand that people have their right to opinions and their right not to want to involve themselves in a situation.
I'm not going to get my personal views in because I'll be very clear in saying, like, when it comes to life or death, I don't think it should be about personal views. That's my personal opinion, is that we should have a duty to one another. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I respect you having the view to say you're not mad at her at all. Did she later apologize to you?
No, she didn't. We didn't speak to each other for a very long time because I live in an apartment. I mean, in a complex, so we would bump into each other on the lift, and I was friends with her nephew. We went to the same school, so she started greeting me out of the blue, you know, and she was calling me my child, whatever the case is. But we never sat down and had the conversation to say, I'm sorry, or how are you doing? I kind of feel she kind of tried to close it up with the relationship she was having with me at that specific moment.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Where are you today when you think about that experience?
I'm at a place where I have forgiven myself. I have taken accountability of my actions. What do I mean by that? I was supposed to be, in lack of a better explanation, I was supposed to be more careful and I had to kind of look after myself before I engage in such in sexual activities at my young age type of thing. So I've forgiven myself, I've made peace with it, even though at times it kind of haunts me, but I've also become an activist and advocate in terms of making sure that young people can access safe abortions, which is quality also at the same time.
And that story for me is just so heavy, just in terms of how it ended. Do you find from your side how that there are many unspoken emotions in some of these stories? Like, a person might assume that because you sought out termination that you don't feel bad, that you don't care.
Yeah, well, it is. I think a lot of the times people keep that to themselves because once they start opening up or sharing or wanting to talk about it, you know, in real talk and honestly, people start to judge and they're afraid to be judged. We all care, essentially, what people think about us. And I think even for me, the longest part, the journey, the painful part was speaking out. I couldn't talk and it was haunting me for a very long time.
Is there anything you think you would have done differently knowing now what you know?
I think I would have not sought advice from my friends. I'm not saying they're bad people. I would have went to the clinic to find out what exactly was happening, you know, and I would have tried to find out my other options because at the time, adoption I didn't think about. And I think because I didn't think about it because I had no information, but also that is on my part because I had to go and kind of research before making certain decisions. And I would have never taken that taxi to Alexander.
Mm-hmm. And I think information is key. I hope no one is at home thinking that, well, your regret should be, I wouldn't have done it. I'm happy you're speaking along the lines of more information so you can actually make informed decisions. And that's what it boils down to.
Exactly.
Next time on Unpacked.
Whether you believe it's wrong or right, it's gonna happen, and it's gonna happen illegally.
You suffered depression because of a sexual assault.
I felt like I was just holding on to this big secret.
I really do advise women, whether older or younger, not to really care what anybody says.
Unpacked with Relebogile Mabotja. New episodes weekdays at 5:30 p.m. on my YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Television edited broadcasts weekdays at 5 p.m. Open up to S3.